Hi, beautiful people. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Yes, once again, I am back from a century-long hiatus. But guys, my laptop broke down, so I had to buy a new one, which, as you can imagine, was extremely frustrating considering all of my files and everything are on my old laptop. So I'm currently in the process of starting again from scratch, which is why today's YouTube video is going to be in a podcast style. Also, guys, sometimes I run out of things to make YouTube videos about, so that also tends to be the reason for why I have these long breaks. But a few weeks ago, I had a conversation with one of my friends about interracial relationships, which was a very interesting one. Now, I don't usually talk about interracial relationships on my YouTube channel, which is weird, right? Considering I talk about race relations a lot on my channel. But the reason I haven't spoken about interracial relationships until now is because I wanted to avoid being accused of being a bitter black woman who doesn't want to see black men or women happy who are in interracial relationships. I also didn't want to be accused of trying to put black people off interracial dating because my views on interracial dating, I guess, fall under the unpopular opinion. Well, at least to me. But if you are interested in what I have to say about interracial relationships slash marriages, stay tuned and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe at the end. So, a few weeks ago, I was walking home with one of my gym bros and we got talking about dating, relationships, and how the universe doesn't seem to be on either of our side as it pertains to being able to find the right person. Somehow we got talking about his how his mother would want him to marry a girl from his culture if he was to find someone and marry. Now, I think it's important to note that he is from Sri Lanka, so his mom would want him to marry a Sri Lankan girl, more specifically a Tamil girl. So that's how we got talking about the importance, the value, and the good that can come from marrying within your culture. I think it's pretty much well known that within the Asian community, they take great pride in marrying within their culture. For the most part, if you are to speak to most Asians, they will more than likely tell you that they're going to marry within their own race. Now, it's 2024, so of course things are changing. So, not all Asians will marry within their culture. Some have chosen to marry out of their culture. I'm seeing an increase of Asian women with white men, some black men. I'm seeing some Asian men with white women. I don't. Oh, okay. So at my gym, there is this black girl and Asian boy who are a couple. I will say I originally thought that they were just gym partners because, well, first of all, I rarely see black women or Asian men date outside of their race. And in the rare occasions that they do, they usually tend to partner up with white men or white women. So when I found out that they were a couple, I was shocked because Asian men and black women are unlikely pairing. So, going back to the conversation that I had with him, he said that his mom would want to build a close relationship with her daughter in law and how much more easier it would be if they had culture and race in common, which again is a valid point. He also said that relationships are really hard as it is because you have to face the problems that come with dating someone within your own race. Those problems are then exacerbated times 10 if you date someone outside of your race. If you guys watch 90 Day Fiancé, you'll know that the root cause of many of the couple's problems on that show are rooted in cultural differences. All in all, it was a very interesting conversation, probably because we both had the same views. I feel like if I was to have this conversation with a black man, the conversation would have been vastly different. And I say that because I found that black men are a lot more open to dating out than every other race of man. Now, you guys listening to this might be thinking, well, this is amazing. What that tells us is that black men are more tolerant, less prejudice. Well, not when you take into consideration that a lot of black people have internalized racism. A lot of black men that I know have either dated outside of their race before or are currently in an interracial relationship right now. I know some black women who are in interracial relationships, but the number of black men who I know who are in interracial relationships exceeds the number of black women that I know who are in interracial relationships. I feel like it's well known that black women are far less likely to date out than black men. And honestly, I can't tell you why that's the case. It could be for many different reasons. Maybe because black women have this obligation to remain race loyal. It could be because Eurocentric beauty standards prevent black women from being able to date out because other races of men prefer women who are lighter. It could be because black women in general only find black men attractive. I can't pinpoint an exact reason why black women are less likely to date out than black men. I personally feel like black women have been socialized to only want and go for black men. And I don't mean to make that sound negative because it's not negative. And what I mean by that is 15 years ago, growing up, it wasn't common for me to see a black woman with a man that wasn't black. It was common to see black men with non black women, but it just wasn't common for me to see a black woman with a white man or an Asian man. None of my aunties were with non black men. So growing up, I just thought to myself, yeah, my husband and the father of my child is going to be a black man because I just thought that that was the norm. I would see my uncles get with white women, mess around with white women. Whether or not they took these white women seriously or not, that's up for debate. But the black woman that I was surrounded by, I didn't see them with white men, nor did I see interracial relationships on television that depicted black women with non black men. I just assumed that that was just how it was. I feel like for a lot of black boys, that's different. We're constantly seeing imagery of successful black men with non black women, from rappers to footballers, athletes, billionaires, having a non black woman on their arm. And then you have to take into consideration the internalized racism that some black men have, where they hate their blackness. They in turn will view black women as not being suitable partners. I feel like these black men will tell themselves that it's because black women are this, that, their attitude, blah, blah, blah. But deep down, they know it's because they hate being black, and telling themselves that black women are this and that helps them make sense of the internalized racism that they're dealing with. Because they know that the same qualities that they give for excluding black women as a dating preference are the same qualities that they would overlook in a woman whose skin is lighter or white. And I know that black women can display the same behaviors that I'm describing in some black men, but again, it's well known that most black women won't date out. Yes, most black men are with black women. Marrying them, now that's a different issue. But again, because black men date out more than black women, yeah. And I also wanted to talk about something that I've noticed in quite a few of these relationships, aside from them having a low success rate. I've noticed that when black men date out, they typically display the same level of hatred towards these white women. So these white women will also be cheated on, left to be single mothers, played, and many other things. Again, I want to make it known that, of course, not all black men, especially the ones that are dating out, but I've noticed that whenever I've had conversations with some black men about interracial dating, they usually say things along the lines of white women are a lot more agreeable, they give black men a lot more peace than black women. Black women ask for too much. White women are easier to deal with. Of course, black women aren't perfect. There's definitely some things that we can work on, but black men will go on to then date these white women and treat them even worse than black women. So then I realized when these particular type of black men say that white women give them peace, what they're really saying is that white women won't hold me to any standards or hold me accountable for any trash tendencies that I may display. And if I do display any trash tendencies, then there will be minimal to no consequences. But that's not a reflection on black women. That's a reflection on these particular black men and the white woman that they are dating. But they will make it about black women so that we feel bad about ourselves. I can't tell you how many times I've seen these particular black men disrespect the white woman and non-black woman that they date. It's horrendous. And it has me thinking maybe it's not a bad thing that these particular type of black men date out. And the funny thing is, I actually wish that black women did have these high standards and expectations that black men accuse black women of having. But let's be honest, the reality is most black women don't, or else many of us wouldn't be single mums. I've noticed that a lot of white women that I've seen date black men, okay, not all, usually have daddy issues, don't align with the beauty standards within their own race, white women who have a tough time being able to attract white men for whatever reason. And if they don't, then they strategically go for black men who have money. So they won't go for your average black man. Again, I'm not talking about every single white woman. I can only speak for myself and what I've seen growing up. I remember overhearing a conversation with two women. I can't quite remember when this was exactly. I think it might have been when I was attending college. Anyway, one was black and the other one was white. Now, this white woman didn't align with the traditional Eurocentric beauty ideals. So she was a plus sized woman who was a brunette. She was a beautiful woman. She just didn't fit the beauty standards within her own racial group, which is skinny white woman with blonde hair and blue eyes. Both ladies were talking about their type. And the white woman said that her type was black men, to which the black woman responded by asking the white woman why her type was black men. And she then said, because, well, white men don't like big girls, whereas black men do. And I think it's because black men have always celebrated thicker women. So she then said that only black men show her interest, which is also something I slightly want to touch on. There is already this misconception amongst black men that white women are easy and gullible, and I can only imagine that being amplified times 10 when the white woman doesn't align with the beauty standards. So there's this documentary that I watch that documents white women who go off on holidays and get into these brief holiday romances with black men, typically from the Caribbean or Africa. Long story short, these men end up targeting these women in an attempt to try and get citizenship into the UK or the US. But again, if you pay attention to the white woman that they target, they usually target white women who are older and who are plus sized white women because they believe that these women must have low self esteem. I have overheard conversations and seen videos where men have openly admitted to purposefully targeting bigger women, not just white women, but bigger women in general, because they believe that these women have low self esteem, therefore, will be a lot easier. Of course, that isn't the case all the time. There are some men who prefer plus sized women, and it's not because they have a fetish or ulterior motives. But going back to white women who date black men, I feel like some do so because they're aware that they don't align with the beauty standards within the white community and they become easily duped by any black man who expresses interest. Black women do it as well. I've noticed that black women who date out are on the slimmer end of the spectrum and are darker skinned. They usually date outside their race because of the same reasons as well, because they don't align with the beauty standards within the black community. So this is definitely something that people are doing because they feel as though they're not good enough for their own race. With white women, if they are unable to attract a white man, then they just come into the black community and know that they can just entice any black man that they want because within the black community, light skin trumps all. She doesn't have to be the most attractive white woman. Her having light skin is more than enough. And I remember when I was in secondary school and I was on my way back home from school, and one of my friends at the time said, now these are her words, not mine. A white woman, an ugly one, can go to Africa and come back with a husband. Now, of course, in a less cruel way, what she was trying to say is a white woman doesn't necessarily have to be a bombshell to attract a black man, whereas with a black woman, that's it's different. We have to almost be perfect to even get a man to look twice. I've also personally noticed a difference between black men dating out and white men dating out. So, in the unlikely case where a white man dates out specifically a black woman, what I've noticed is that white men make sure that they choose a black woman that complements them. And what I mean by that is, okay, again, not all, but I think for white men who date out, what they think to themselves is if I'm going to risk being ostracized by my own community, being seen with a black woman on my arm, it should at the very least be a black woman who is actually worth me being ostracized for, meaning she would have to be somewhat attractive in shape. And even if she's not the most beautiful black woman out there, she would at the very least have to carry herself in a very prestigious way. So they're not going to pick the hood black woman. I think they call them quiches over in the States. Whereas with black men, well, the self hating ones, because they have internalized racism, being white quite simply is enough. So they won't have these different requirements for white women that they otherwise would have for black women. Again, I know it's not just black men. Black women can also display these exact same tendencies. Like, for example, the divestment movement. I've noticed that the argument that's often used is the divorce rate between black women and white men being lower than the divorce rate between white women and black men. Couldn't you just argue that the reason why that's the case is because white men and black women are far less likely to get married than the latter, and not because white men are better suited partners for black women? I don't know, that's just a thought. But I'm going to finish on this. If you are a black person and you're unable to gel with people from your own race, the group from which you belong to, there is no way you're able to get along with people outside of your race. So if you're a black woman and you're divesting because you have low self esteem, because the black boys you went to school with told you that you weren't pretty enough, Please don't do that, because your low self esteem could result in you attracting an equally abusive white man. Work on unlearning all of that trauma, and then you'll attract a man according to the healed version of you, whether that's a white man or a black man. Preferably, we'd want it to be a black man, but if it's a white man, you do you. And the same thing goes for black men. If you're unable to get along with the opposite gender of your race, then most definitely you won't be able to get along with people outside of your race. And I feel like there are a lot of interracial relationships. I personally feel like this is why a lot of interracial relationships are just not successful. And this is the side of interracial relationships that people don't want to address, because it goes against the love conquers all. Interracial relationships are a sign that racial tensions are a thing of the past narrative that is often being pushed. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much all I have to say about interracial relationships. There are many more things I could say, but I think it's best that I don't, because I feel like what I've said so far could trigger outrage, even though I've tried my best to tread lightly. I'm going to leave it at this. If you agreed with a lot of the things that I've mentioned, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Even if you don't,